Hey there, everybody. Welcome to your horoscopes for the week. These are the horoscopes for the week ending October 8th. Got a lot of big stuff going on this week, so we're just going to go ahead and jump in there right to it. And we are going to start with Aries. We're ending the week with the moon in Aries in conjunction with that retrograde Jupiter, which the Jupiter is actually going to leave Aries before it goes direct, or get really, really close to leaving Aries before it goes direct. Good news is he'll be out of there after the first few months of next year. So you won't be having this uh problem, if it is a problem, which unfortunately right now it is, next year, which is good. But of course, we're not in next year yet, we're in this year. And Jupiter's opposition with Mercury, which is now direct, and by the end of this week we are officially out of the shadow period of it as well, so we can put that behind us. It was a tough Mercury retrograde, to be honest with you. As I'm recording these horoscopes now, of course, we're still in the middle of the retrograde, but I would have to say that so far it's been a very difficult retrograde for a lot of people. I'm hearing about it all over the place, even from those who don't normally follow the Mercury retrograde. So it's been kind of a tough one, and it's really nice that this week we can put it behind us, finally. But this opposition between Jupiter and Mercury is a bit of a challenge, as Jupiter's focus is right on the cusp of focus on the home and focus on the mind, how you think about things. And this is really actually important because Mercury's position is very much in long-term goals. And now, in terms of how you think about your long-term goals, mindset is everything. In fact, this week in particular that I'm doing this recording, the conversation about mindset has come up a lot. I mean, just an awful lot. And I know that most Aries have well, most of the Aries that I've met anyways have a very healthy mindset about what they need to do. And rather than worrying about what needs to be done, they just sort of make a plan and get it done, which is really how you want to do it, of course. But I'm also really kind of feeling that there's almost a restlessness in this particular planning of goals. Like if you spend one more minute at home, you're going to lose your mind, sort of kind of a thing. And so I feel that these goals are very much around travel. They're around kind of shaking things up, getting out of the norm a little bit. And I really feel like the moon coming in at the last minute, right at the end of the week, sort of adds an emotional element to this. It's just sort of like, it's not just that I want to make some travel plans, or I want to get out of the house for a while and go see some other part of the world. It's more like a necessity, if that makes sense. Now, I know one Aries in particular that is getting ready this month to go on a bit of a trip out of the country, and getting all that stuff together at this point, I'm sure, if not leaving at this particular part of the week. But I feel other Aries that I have worked with really just needing this space away, just needing this time, needing to get out. And the truth of the matter is that you can't sit around and wait for the money to be there. You have to plan for it. You have to set aside the money. You have to take the time to save the money, to put it aside, to be able to have the money to fly wherever it is that you want to go, or rent a car to go wherever it is that you want to go. And in the meantime, I feel like a good band-aid for this would be to plan a weekend away somewhere, which is a little bit closer to home, but not quite being stuck at home, if that makes sense. I feel like for Aries in particular, Aries is one of those signs. Whenever Aries that I know just can't sit still. I mean, even when they're sitting, they're moving, kind of a thing. And so this becomes really important. I feel Aries get restless really easy. So rather than trying to put off um, this huge trip, if you can't take this huge trip right now, it's really important this week to maybe plan something that's a shorter trip, something that just breaks up the monotony of your day-to-day life, something that brings a little bit more excitement into your life, something that just will kind of sort of get you out of the stagnant everyday life, even if it's just a couple of days. It doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be something, if that makes sense, something that resonates with you, something that you enjoy, something that brings you joy, something that whether it's by yourself or with your family, it's something that for your own mental and emotional health is really important. So I really feel that focus is on creating these goals and giving yourself permission to break up your schedule and do something different, because I really feel that we all are in that boat where we need to do that every now and then. And for Aries in particular, it's a necessity for your mental and your emotional health. Because when you come back, even from a short trip, you're more focused, you're ready to, you're ready to take on the day again, you're ready to take on whatever responsibilities you have. And it just gives you that extra boom of energy that you need to be able to do that. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Taurus. Taurus is very much focused on family this week, and probably will be focused on family throughout the month. Uranus is still there, still retrograde, continues to be retrograde this week. And focus with Uranus, of course, we still have that square with Saturn going on, and that's going to continue on for the next couple of months at least. Especially with both of them being in retrograde, it just kind of sort of makes them stick in this sort of challenge here. Saturn's focus is on the mind, on how you think about things, but also on the cusp of focus on the past. And I feel like a lot of times when we find ourselves focused on the past, our focus is definitely not in the right place, if that makes sense. We tend to focus on the past, pine for things that have already happened, kind of a thing, rather than looking at the past for what it is. And we also have this really weird way of sort of making the past sort of changing the story a little bit. So for instance, we'll look back on the good old days, and of course we're not thinking about all the difficulties and challenges that happened during the good old days. We're only focused on the good things, omitting the challenges, which of course doesn't really give us a clear perspective of what it is that we're looking at, if that makes sense. This particular challenge between the two planets is a bit interesting. Both planets cusping two different houses, so it kind of amplifies the challenge a little bit. Uranus is very much on the cusp of those that you love, as well as your day-to-day schedule. And Saturn is very much focused on how you think about things, how you process things, and then that look to the past there. I feel that what's really going to come out of this for you guys more than anything is just, with both signs being fixed signs, change is always a challenge for fixed signs. Fixed signs like security. They like things to stay the same thing always, because it's just easier that way. You know what to expect. And we're not mutable signs here, so we don't need things to change. There is not to say that fixed signs don't get stuck in a rut, because they absolutely do. But it's less likely for fixed signs to get stuck in a rut because they enjoy that consistency and the security of knowing what is going to happen. So when you are going through a change, it sort of puts you in this very uncomfortable and insecure place. And I feel like those Tauruses that are going through changes currently right now, maybe having a little bit of a more difficult time simply because they're dealing with their own fear of the change. And that's really important. The more you blow that fear up in your mind, of course, the more power it's going to have and the more difficult that challenge is going to be. So you want to try and maintain that as much as possible. Your brain kind of goes in this crazy place where it's like it loops and it keeps coming back to the same place in the same place in the same place, making you kind of crazy. You have total control over that, by the way. Absolute total control over that if you choose to take control over that. And that's really what this is about. Now, the good news is we still have a grand trine for most of the week with a now direct Mercury as well as Pluto. And that is going to start to break up towards the end of the week. But we're talking like Friday or Saturday, it starts to break up. So you still have it for the bulk of this week. And using that all earth energy this week is really important. To me, a grand trine in earth signs are the signs, of course, the element that gets everything done. They're the doers, they're the worker bees, so to speak, of the zodiac. And so we as a collective, we need earth signs because without them, nothing would ever get done. I mean, air signs are intellectuals, they're awesome, they come up with great ideas. They're just not great at actually doing anything about them. Same with fire signs and with water signs. They're both very emotional signs. And while fire signs have a ton of energy, they're not very focused, or they're not known for being very focused as well as earth signs are. So a grand trine and planets in all three signs working together helps the collective as a whole. It really does. For you guys, though, I feel that with Mercury's focus on long-term goals and Pluto's focus also on the past, we're looking at creating different ways, looking into the past, looking at the different ways that you did things in the past to create your goal plan for what's going to happen from here on out. And so I feel like if you are going through a lot of changes and it's a very scary time, this is actually a great way to give your mind something else to focus on rather than focusing on what's going to happen, rather than focusing on the fear. You can shift your mindset to focus on something that might be a little bit more productive. And by doing that, it's helpful because it sort of takes that fear away and allows you to just focus on what is instead of being afraid of what might be, if that makes sense. We also continue to have a grand sextile with Neptune and Pluto as well. Neptune is also very much focused on how you think. So when you look at, you have a challenge with how you think, but you have a helpful aspect with how you think too. That's just double the power there in order to help you move forward and eliminate that fear as much as you possibly can. Remember, fear is not necessarily something that's supposed to hold you back. It does hold everybody back. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've been in there myself multiple times. It does have a tendency to hold people back, but it doesn't have to. Fear is a tool that you can use to propel yourself forward too. It all depends on how you use it. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Gemini. We still have Mars in Gemini. We are going to continue to have Mars in Gemini through the year into next year. And while Mars is not retrograde yet, get ready, because in a few weeks, Mars is going to go retrograde in Gemini. as well. So be prepared for that, guys. But we do have a little bit of a challenge here, and we have a wonderful all air sign grand trine too, which is fantastic. We've had an earth sign grand trine for a while. And earth signs are known as the signs that really get things done. And the air sign grand trine is all about ideas. And with all the problems going on in the world right now, I love to see these two elements working together, hopefully for good, because we do need to see some very positive changes in the world right now. Things are just getting so incredibly challenging and difficult for everybody. Let's focus on the challenge here really quick, as Mars is in a T-square, which you call a T-square, when there are planets in three of the four modes. I'm sorry, three signs that are the same mode. So we have Mars, obviously, which is focused on relationships, Mercury, focused on long-term goals, and Jupiter, which is right on the cusp of focus on the home, as well as the mind and how you think about things. Now, what creates this challenge here is relationships. If you're talking about long-term goals within your relationships, there's a couple of tricky things actually that could come up there. First of all, because this is pointed at home, we're talking about very close relationships. So we're talking about your spouse, we're talking about your children, we're talking about those very intimate relationships that everybody has. And in terms of long-term goals, and especially at the very end of the week, as the moon moves into conjunction with Jupiter and adds this kind of emotional element to this whole mess here, what I see coming out of this is challenges and difficulties within these relationships. Now, Mercury's not retrograde anymore. And as we get to the very end of the week, we're also out of the shadow period of the retrograde too, or just about out of the shadow period of the retrograde as well. So that sort of plays into it. Even though Mercury isn't quite retrograde anymore, that shadow period does still create challenges. And let's all face it, this was a very challenging Mercury retrograde this time. I mean, it was just nonstop for a lot of people. And I've talked to a lot of people, those who believe in astrology and those who have no idea about what's going on. We're just having really challenging times with a lot of different things. In terms of your relationships, what's really coming up here, I feel, is that there's two things playing into this. One, you may find yourself dealing with challenges within those intimate relationships that may have you questioning whether you want to continue to have this relationship. Now, because focus is on the mind, this is really important, especially for Geminis. Geminis are very intellectual signs. They spend a lot of times in their head, and the more time you spend in your head thinking about the problem, the more you make the problem bigger and bigger and bigger. And to be honest with you, sometimes this means taking a very small problem and blowing it up into a humongous problem. And sometimes it's also that you just have so many problems that it takes that one little thing that just blows everything up. But if there's a problem within the relationship, it needs to be blown up in order to be addressed. And if there's no way to address the problem or fix the problem, then you move on to the next stage. But usually, especially because Mercury is a part of this, communication really is key here. One of the biggest relationship challenges in the world is the fact that people don't talk to each other. They talk about each other to other people, which doesn't really fix anything. When they do talk to each other, they use inappropriate communication patterns like sarcasm and joking and, not really just getting to the point and sitting down and having a conversation about this is a problem and something about it needs to change. So this challenge is really coming up because if you do have any kind of relationship issues, now is the time to address them. We also have a beautiful grand trine between Mars and as well as Saturn, which is very much focused on the past, as well as the sun in Libra, as well as Venus. Venus is sort of moving into conjunction with the sun as we speak, which is focused on your career. So you have two very important things to focus on here. One is a really good one. Your career and your career goals are important. And most Geminis that I know very few Geminis that have had the same job their whole lives. They like to shake things up. They like to move things up. Geminis get bored very easily. So if you're thinking about making a career change, now is a good time to do it because you've got the right kind of energy going into it. But you don't want to focus all of your energy on that and ignore the problems in your relationships also. Those need to be addressed if you want to make sure that you don't have these problems later on down the line. So that's what I have for you guys. And we're going to go ahead and move on to Cancer. We have no planets in Cancer. Focus is very much on finances and a little bit on relationships. Pallas Athene brings this sort of focus on relationships into your sign this week. And Pallas Athene is not a major planet, more considered a dwarf planet, a secondary influence, if you will. The good news about it is that she doesn't really aspect other planets as much, which is good because we have a lot of planets that are aspecting each other in crazy ways right now, and you guys just don't need that, right? But Pallas Athene is known as the warrior goddess. She is fierce. She is strong. I kind of look at her like Boudicca. Boudicca was a queen who had everything taken from her, and she fought to the end of her life to get it back. I don't think she ever actually got it back, to be honest with you, but that wasn't the point. She fought to the death to get back what was taken from her. And that kind of influence over your relationships is sort of interesting because I feel like for you Cancers this week, it really is all about evaluating your relationships, looking at the relationship in terms of what is there that you want to be there and what is there that you don't want to be there. And Cancers really aren't known for problem solving, especially in terms of their relationships. Most of the Cancers that I have met in my life have this tendency to kind of sort of sit back quietly and hope that somebody sees that there is a problem and this is not going to solve your problem, basically. Pallas Athene is coming in to say, no, you need to stand up and say, this is a problem. You need to talk about it. I have a Cancer child, and we've had this conversation millions and millions of times because I've always told him, if you have a problem with me, if you have a problem with your problem, you've got a problem with anybody, you need to talk about it. We can't fix the problem if we don't know that there is a problem. And this is really what this is about. If you feel like the relationship isn't symbiotic, if you feel that the relationship is just not working for you, or it seems like it's working more for the other person and less for you, you have to say something about it. We're still in the shadow period of the Mercury retrograde this week. So it's even more important to make sure that you use your words. And it never is a good time to talk about it when you're in mid-fight. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If you are fighting about something within one of your relationships that you've been fighting about a million times, wait for the fight to diffuse and then go back to it later on and let that person know, hey, this is a problem for me. I'm sure it's a problem for you. Let's sit down and talk about finding a solution to this problem so it isn't a problem anymore. And that's what we want to eliminate, is having any kind of problem in the relationship as much as possible. I mean, let's be realistic here. There isn't a relationship that doesn't have a problem in some way, shape, or form. So that's why we have problems. We have problems to create solutions. And it's really important that we do that. So that is what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to move on to Leo. We have no planets in Leo this week, which is not a bad thing considering. We do have Lilith, the dark moon, in Leo, and Leo's focus is very much on finances. With the dark moon influencing finances, this is maybe a little scary. The dark moon, or the Lilith, as she's also referred to, is a mathematical point in the chart. There really is no physical anything in the chart for the dark moon. She is a mathematical point. So kind of like the part of fortune, it's not really based on anything that's actually there. But she has a very powerful influence nonetheless. And the dark moon is all about drastic changes, things that you just cannot live with have to be changed in drastic ways. And when we're talking about finances, that's kind of scary when you think about it. Making drastic changes in your finances, most people really don't want to do that. They like to, do what's working for them and stick with that. Or if it's not working for you, it's time to make drastic changes. And that's really what this is all about for you Leos, is the fact that if you are having financial challenges and these financial challenges have been coming up over and over and over again, you are stuck in that definition of insanity and you need to make some changes. And this week, I feel the dark moon's influence is really coming in, creating those problems in order to show you that it is time to make some changes and how you deal with your finances, whether it's making more money, whether it's how you invest your money or how you save your money, how you do your financial planning. If things aren't working, it's time to change it and find something that does. And the best way to do that, well, I would say the first best way to do that is to talk to somebody who is good at financial planning. That's always a good start, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And let's face it, most of us don't know what we're doing. There's nothing wrong with that. It just is what it is. That's why there are professionals out there to help us, right? But the other thing is to look at what you are doing, identify that it's not working, and tweak it. Find a solution, find something that does work better. And again, if you're not educated on how to do that, find somebody that can educate you, that can help you find a solution to that problem. The more you do this, the easier it becomes, and the easier it is for you to change your financial issues into financial successes. And that is really what it's all about this week. So that's what I have for you guys. And we're going to move on to Virgo. We have Ceres in Virgo, and we have Mercury in Virgo. Mercury is no longer retrograde this week, so we're happy about that. However, we are still a little bit in the shadow period of that Mercury retrograde this week. That will be over next week, and then things will hopefully calm down. We can only cross our fingers and hope, to be honest with you. Because things have been a little crazy. And this particular retrograde was really a challenge for a lot of people. I saw the challenges myself. I've talked to a lot of clients who dealt with the challenges. It's just been a big challenge all the way around, and we're happy to see it go, in all honesty. We do have an opposition between Mercury and Jupiter, and actually that opposition is a T-square when you bring Mars in Gemini into it. Mars is focused on relationships. Jupiter and the moon right at the end of the week when the moon moves into conjunction with Jupiter is right on the cusp of focus on the mind, as well as focus on the home. And Mercury's focus is on long-term goals. Now, one thing I do know about Virgos is even though they're an earth sign, they're very intellectual at the same time. Intellectual means smart, of course, but it also means somebody who spends way too much time in their head trying to process and not enough time actually going out and getting things done, which is what the earth sign part of you really is all about. it's about creating a balance between those two. Okay. You can't overdo and you can't overthink. You have to create a balance between those two. In terms of goal setting, it is really important that you find a balance between those two things. And the reason why is because both, for Virgos, both of these things are necessary in order to make an educated decision, in order to create the right goal for you now. And because Virgos tend to be a little bit mutable, that also means mutable energy means your mind changes on a regular basis. So you want to make sure that your goals, the way that you set up your goals, does sort of leave a little bit room open to changes, if that makes sense. I'm a Virgo child also. In terms of career goals, he has changed his mind. I don't know how many times, it doesn't really create a lot of stability for him. But at the same time, when you're talking about a Virgo, you're talking about somebody who is really looking to find that thing that is going to resonate with them. And sometimes it takes time to be able to find that, and that's okay. So I don't worry about it too terribly much. My mom's, I worry about it a little bit because I know that the process that he's going through is necessary for him to find what it is that he's looking for. He just hasn't been able to identify what it is entirely that he's looking for yet. And that's okay. He will get there eventually. So in terms of goal setting, it's really important that you leave room for your goals to change, especially if you're a mutable sign, because your goals are going to change. And there's nothing wrong with you. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It just means that you can't set things in stone. The more you try and set things in stone, the more difficult and challenging it is going to be. Now, we do have a beautiful Earth Grand Trine again this week, all the way up until the very end of the week where it breaks up. And we are, of course, talking about a Grand Trine between Pluto and Capricorn, which is focused on the past. Mercury in Virgo, which is focused on long-term goals, and Uranus in Taurus, which is focused on those you love. And this grand trine sort of brings everything together to remind you that you have this fantastic support system. And this support system is not just there to pick you up when you fall on your butt. The support system is also there to help you get through all the stuff that's going on in your brain there and figure out a plan for how to get from where you are now to the end of your goals and what those goals are, to be honest with you. I think a lot of Virgos get caught up in the fact that they don't know what they want. And when they don't know what they want, it sort of creates this energy where they just sort of float around until they figure it out. The truth is that floating around, fun though it may be, it takes its toll on you after a while. And you have to remember that you are an earth sign. Earth signs do need stability to a certain extent. Maybe not as much stability as Capricorns do or even Tauruses do, but they still need stability in some way, shape, or form. If you're floating, you're not stable. So this creates a lot of fear. And of course, when that fear gets in the way, everything gets all screwed up. That's why you have those people there to help you, to come in, allow you to bounce off ideas, maybe give some suggestions of their ideas so that you have more information to work with, even in some cases than you need, in order to help you see the end result of where you want to be. So it's a lot. I'm not going to lie. This week, it does seem like it's a lot for you guys. But when you look at it, this sort of comes up to help you out because If you're constantly swimming around, bouncing from one thing to another, you're not actually getting anything done. All this mess is coming up here this week to give you something to focus on, to take all of that stuff that you are currently focusing on and saying, okay, let's really take a look at what's the most important focus, the goal that really resonates with you and makes sense. And then let's take a look at all the other stuff and see if those things stack up to the goal that really makes sense, and decide whether we want to keep them, or if we want to continue to keep them, or if we just want to kind of sort of put those things on the back burner until later when we have more time for them. So that's what I have for you guys this week. I'm going to go ahead and move on to Libra. We have the Sun and Venus in Libra this week. Libra's focus is very much on career. So we're talking a couple of different things. One, we're talking about focusing on your career success and how you can amplify that, which is always good. In a grand trine, an air sign grand trine forming towards the end of the week with Mars as well as Saturn. Grand trines are just a beautiful energy. And when we're talking about a grand trine in the air signs, we're talking about a lot of intellect going on right now. We're talking about a lot of big ideas. And even though we have a couple of retrogrades in there, the retrogrades are actually helpful. We'll talk a little bit here about Saturn and Saturn's retrograde. Focus on the past. If you're looking for current success and current goals, it seems a little bit crazy to focus on the past. However, the past does play its part in whatever we're doing currently in the present, or whatever goals we're setting for the future. First of all, we want to take a look at the past and see if we've been in this same place before. If we have, we want to look at what worked and what didn't work, and we want to eliminate what didn't work and continue to use what did work, because it may work in this instance as well. Mars is very much focused on relationships, and relationships and career don't always seem to go together, but they do. They very much do, because of course you form relationships within your job and form relationships within your career, and hopefully those relationships are the type that are there to help you succeed in your goals. If they're not, you might want to double check those relationships. Now, this has happened, I can't tell you how many times, every single place that I've ever worked. You know, you do a really good job there, which most Libras do. They love you. They want to keep you. They'll do anything they possibly can to keep you, but they'll also do everything they possibly can to stop you from moving away from them if you have outgrown them. And I've been in that situation multiple different times. In this sense, looking back to the past to see how that played out is really helpful, because obviously if in the past it didn't play out very well, it probably won't play out very well this time either. So you do want to, of course, look at that. In terms of relationships, your personal relationships can be helpful in this situation as well, because in some cases, depending on the relationship, they can bring some ideas that might be helpful in terms of what to do now, currently, in terms of achieving those goals. So in some cases, relationships can get in the way too, because, you know, a lot of times those people that you are going to for help are actually have more of an investment in themselves than they do in you. And of course, those relationships are not the ones that are going to be helpful to you at this time. You want to talk to somebody who is invested in your success for you, not necessarily for themselves. So in terms of, you know, I mean, I always am a big fan of talk to your spouse and see what your spouse says, but your spouse may be too emotionally invested in this, because of course, whatever career changes you make are going to affect your spouse as well as you. And so therefore, it just may not be the best. They may not be the best person to talk to about this. You may want to get an outside opinion, somebody who's not directly affected by it, somebody whose opinion is more what's best for you and not necessarily what's best for them. So it is a good thing. You just have to pick and choose who you want, who's the best person to kind of help you out with that, if that makes sense. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to move on to Scorpio. We have no planets in Scorpio this week. Not a bad thing. Let's enjoy the next couple of weeks. We don't have any planets in Scorpio because it'll be difficult. Okay, I'm just going to say there's going to be some challenges there. And we will have the sun coming into Scorpio here in a couple of weeks. But so let's just enjoy the time that we have it while we have it, right? Focus is on those that support you. And I feel with Scorpios, a lot of the time, this is a very big deal. All water signs need emotional support. It's as simple as that. Scorpios are, I wouldn't say the exception to that rule because that's not true. However, Scorpios have this tendency, pardon me, more so than the other water signs, I would say, to sort of act like they don't need support, if that makes sense. Or at least make it seem like they don't need anybody else, kind of a thing. And it really does depend on the Scorpio, of course, and what the Scorpio has gone through and how those things have influenced that particular individual emotionally. But what it really comes down to here is whether you act like you don't need support or whether you don't need support and you're just independent, sometimes you do. And we all need it from time to time. And I feel like asking for support is one of the things that is most difficult for most people, is to admit that you actually need help. It's a very scary thing, in all honesty. Very scary thing for fixed signs for sure, like Scorpio. And this week, I feel it's very important that not only do you ask for that support, but that you see that you have that support, if that makes any sense at all. Because life is challenging and it will always be challenging to a certain extent. And we all need help through that from time to time. The more you deny needing help, the more you deny help, period, the more challenging it actually becomes for you, because allowing someone to help you in this sense is part of the lesson, if that makes any sense at all also. In terms of that lesson, and we all have many lessons that we're learning in this life. That's kind of what we're doing here and why we're here in the first place. In terms of that lesson, it's not an easy one, especially for those that are very independent individuals. It's not an easy lesson to learn at all for those people, because independent people, it's not even so much that asking for help makes you weak. For some people, it is that. For a lot of people, asking for help is a sign of whether or not you can get help. And so for some people, asking for help is difficult because it's just easier to do it themselves. They can do a better job anyways. And if they can do a better job, what's the point of even asking for help in the first place? But we all find ourselves in those situations where we don't really have a choice. We have to ask for help, and we have to accept that help in whatever way it's given, not the way that we choose to have it. And so this is a means of controlling the situation. And if you're controlling the situation, there's probably some fear there too. The bottom line is that, first of all, fear comes in many forms. It is an absolute necessity to our lives, whether we choose to believe that or not. It's really irrelevant. We have to have fear. Fear is what drives us in some cases to move forward. Fear is what drives us to dig ourselves out of that hole that we've gotten ourselves into. And we all get ourselves into that hole. Um, but when it comes to emotional stuff, fear gets so much bigger than it does in any other aspect of our lives, because we spend so much time thinking about the fears that we have around specific situations. And the more time we spend doing that, the less time we spend digging ourselves out of that emotional hole. So we have people that are there to support us. We have people that are willing to lend a hand and reach into that hole and pull you out of it. And a lot of times I feel that this is really a big thing with Scorpio, is that many times when you're in that situation, you're actually denying yourself any help from anyone else because you don't feel you deserve the help. You deserve to stay in that hole in which you accidentally buried yourself in. And that's the biggest reason why you don't ask for help. When it gets to the point where you just can't do it anymore, this is the point where you need to ask for help, where you need to get past your preconceived notions that there's nobody out there to help you, and simply ask for it. You never know until you do. If it feels like you don't need help emotionally, there's always those instances where we find ourselves needing it in some way, shape, or form. Don't be afraid to ask for it. If somebody says no, move on to the next person. It's not like you don't have a support system. Our support system is just as big or small as we choose to see it, and as big or small as our fear tells us it is. So you want to be very careful not to let your fear take the reins on this one. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Sagittarius. It is all about you, Sagittarians, this week. And we have no planetary activities coming on either, so that's good. That means that there's no challenges, but then again, there's really nothing to help you out either. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, really, when you don't have planets in your sign. Then again, it's also a double-edged sword when you do. So either way. With focus on self this week, it's really important, I feel, for Sagittarians. Focus on self means a lot of different things, a lot more so than any other sign. Sagittarians have a tremendous amount of energy, first of all, and they put that energy into a tremendous amount of things to boot. And as you're going through putting all of that energy out, time for you is usually not on that list. As we get older, I think we tend to put more time for ourselves on that schedule, but younger Sagittarians, not quite so much. I really feel that Sagittarians put more time and effort into others than they do themselves. This week, however, it's really important to reverse that as much as you possibly can for a couple of different reasons. One, if you don't take care of you, how are you going to take care of everybody else? It's just, it really is a given. Two, Sagittarians, because you have so much energy, it's so hard to focus sometimes. And with that being said, the more you are stretched in 10 different directions, the less you can focus on one thing at a time specifically. So that me time is really important, even if it's just a couple of minutes to ground and bubble and to basically clear your mind for a minute so that you can focus is really important. Now, I feel like because this is the focus this week, you may find yourself in more than one instance where it seems very difficult to focus. And that difficulty in focusing is your clue that you're not taking care of yourself, or self-care is not as high a priority on your list as it should be. So that is a clue for you this week in case that does come up. If you are awesome with your self-care, just make sure that it is the proper amount or the proper type of self-care. To me, laying around and watching TV isn't necessarily self-care. I mean, it is. I always give myself 1 week where that's just kind of what I do to decompress, you know. But electronics don't help us decompress either. So we want to also make sure that our self-care is specifically the type of self-care that is going to be helpful to us, whether it is something that we're doing to make sure that our health is in order, meditation. We're focused on our mental health, our emotional health, and our physical health. All of those things are very important parts of self-care. And if you ignore one of them, you might as well ignore all of them. That's how important all three are. So this week is a really good time to make sure that in terms of self-care, those three things are at the top of your list, in terms of making sure that those things are being taken care of in the best way that they can be taken care of for you and your lifestyle. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And I'm going to move on to Capricorn. Focus is on the past this week, and the moon comes into your sign. We're actually going to kick off the week with the moon in your sign, moving into a T-square while she is there with the sun, Venus, and Jupiter. T-squares are a pretty big challenge. Now, you've had Pluto in there, and Pluto has been aspecting all the planets in a very positive way, not in a negative way. So lucky for you guys. However, you're due, okay? And luckily, this is a day-long challenge. As the moon moves into conjunction with Pluto, it is no longer a challenge. So that is good. But this T-square may be a bit of a challenge right at the beginning of the week. Focus is on self, or at least the moon's focus is on self. We've got, pardon me, the sun and Venus is focused on career, making money, very important for Capricorns. And then, of course, in opposition with Jupiter, which is focused on the home. So I feel a couple of things are going to come up with this. One, Capricorns are not known for self-care. Capricorns are known for, I got to take care of everybody else. And that's a big no-no. This is one of the things that the moon is trying to showcase to you right now. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't make money. You can't take care of everybody else. You'll wind up sick. You'll wind up unable to do it. And if you're unable to do it, that's going to stress you out even more. So self-care is really important. Your emotional self-care is really important, especially the moon showcasing this, because I feel that Capricorns are very black and white. You know, it either is or it isn't. There really is no in between. Well, the emotional self is what lives in the in between. If you're not taking care of your emotional health, if you're putting off emotional things onto the back burner and not dealing with them, they are going to catch up with you eventually. And that may be one of those things that triggers this sort of challenge to come up for you specifically. Now, the moon moves on, of course, on Monday into conjunction with Jupiter, and Jupiter continues to be in a grand trine for most of this week with Uranus as well as Mercury, and a grand sextile with Uranus and Neptune. There's just too many planets sometimes. Both really big, really positive challenges. This grand trine is going to last right up until about Friday and then break up in between Friday and Saturday. And we will not have a grand trine anymore, which is sad because I do feel that it has been sort of helpful in the world to actually getting this mess that we're in cleaned up. But for Capricorns, very much focused on the past. Mercury is focused on long-term goals. Uranus is focused on those you love and your day-to-day schedule. And then Neptune is focused on the mind and how you think about things. Two things come up in that. First of all, intuition is really important. Capricorns are not known for being intuitive people. Again, it's black and white. Does it make sense or does it not make sense? Because if it doesn't make sense, I'm not going to do it. And intuition oftentimes doesn't make sense, but it does have its purpose. And ignoring your intuition is not always in your best interests. So there may be some things coming up around that as well. Also, I feel in terms of long-term goals, Capricorn's long-term goals, I feel that there are some past goals that may be coming up now. It seems that there were goals that you just didn't have time for before, and it's like they're almost pestering you because they keep coming up and keep coming up. If something keeps coming up like that, it is worth looking into. We're just going to put it that way. There's a reason why things come up like that, and they keep coming up like that. Bringing it into your focus because your intuition, your intuitive self is saying, hey, we need to do this. Let's find the time to set this goal and create this thing because it is necessary for our growth and development right now. So if it's nagging at you, there's a reason for it. Make sure you give it the proper amount of focus. You never know. This may be something that just was not, it didn't resonate before, but now it resonates perfectly. You've got the time, you've got the money, you've got, I mean, everything is completely and totally set up for this goal. You just have to put the goal in place. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're moving on to Aquarius. We still have Saturn in Aquarius. We still have Saturn in retrograde. We still have Saturn squared with Uranus. Saturn's focus is right on the cusp of the past and how you think about things. And Aquarians are very big thinkers, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Various different balanced levels of both there. And Uranus is very much focused on those you love as well as your day-to-day schedule. Now, a couple of interesting things actually come up with this particular challenge here. One, we're talking about Saturn, and we're talking about Saturn being in retrograde. Saturn is all about responsibility, rules things like teaching, law enforcement, the court system, justice, things like that. When it's in retrograde, though, to me, it kind of feels like none of those things apply, if that makes any sense at all. And that's not saying that we throw our responsibility out the window, because that's not what I'm talking about. It's more about your own personal responsibility and what you are taking responsibility for. And the challenge in this is, of course, nobody wants to look at themselves and take responsibility for their own crap. I mean, it's just not, it's not in our nature to do that. This is why the planets line up in the way that they do in these challenging positions, so that it reminds us that, well, you could put it off all you want to, but we're going to force you to look in that direction now and see where you may be ignoring your own responsibilities or taking on responsibilities that aren't yours. They're somebody else's and you're holding on to them when you shouldn't be. I feel, though, that for this week specifically, we are talking about our own personal responsibilities here and making sure that we are taking care of those personal responsibilities. That is really very important and something that not everybody does, to be honest with you. We live in a world where everybody loves to point the finger at everybody else because they're the problem and we're not the problem. It's everybody else. This is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about pointing that finger right back at ourselves. What in this situation am I responsible for? What can I fix? Not focus on what everybody else should be doing, but what can I do about this situation? This is very important. Everybody needs to do this every now and then. And I feel like Aquarians put themselves on this pedestal. I know I do this. Put themselves on this pedestal of we're perfect and everybody else isn't. So we don't have a problem. Everybody else does. And that's a great big load of bullshit. And I'm looking at myself when I'm saying it. It is a great big giant load of bullshit. It is important to look at what you're responsible for and not blow this up into a bigger deal than it has to be in here. Okay. Because that is an Aquarian thing also. You don't want to overthink it. It's very cut and dry. Let's look at it like Capricorns in a black and white way, shall we? What's my responsibility? Am I taking on my responsibility? What's not my responsibility? What do I need to keep my nose out of? Plain and simple, right? And that doesn't mean that you ignore your lesson and go jump on somebody else to help them learn theirs. No, you just deal with what you have to deal with, because if you don't deal with what you have to deal with, nobody else is either. We are moving into a beautiful grand trine with Mars as well as the Sun and Venus this week as well. Now, grand trines are amazing things. This means that there's a planet in every single element in every single air element in the zodiac. So we've got 4 planets working together. The Sun and Venus are very much focused on your career. Mars is focused on your relationships. Let me tell you something. Those are the big heavy hitters, the 2 big heavy hitters of everybody's life, our career and our relationships, the most important things, really. So as we're bringing these very important things together and looking at our responsibility in both of them, yeah, that does seem like a whole heck of a lot of work, doesn't it? But you know what? You're Aquarians. If anybody can do it, it's you. Take on that responsibility. Dare yourself to take on that responsibility and see what you can do, because I'm sure that you can do way more than you think you can do. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Pisces. Of course, we still have Neptune in Pisces. Neptune continues to be retrograde this week, and Neptune is in opposition with Mercury. Unfortunately, it's true. The Mercury retrograde is over. We are still in that shadow period this week, so it is going to cause a little bit of a challenge. And not only are we in opposition with Mercury, but also we are squared with Mars and Gemini as well. So this creates a much bigger challenge called a T-square. Mars's focus is on relationships. Mercury's focus is on long-term goals. Your focus is on the mind and how the mind works. And this is the challenge really is about you. It's not about everybody else. Okay. And we always think it's about everybody else, but it's not about everybody else. It is, though, about how you think about these things. Now, if you are having difficulties in your relationship, let's say, and you are spending a lot of time, and I do mean a lot of time, rolling it over in your brain, thinking about all the difficulties, and usually when you have a fight with somebody and there's one little difficulty in that argument, that stems to the last argument, the last argument, the last argument in your mind, until you are just angry at everything this person has ever done in their entire life. It just creates a much bigger problem. And it's such a big problem that it is almost more than one person can handle. That is what we want to avoid. That is what this challenge is pointing to right now. Your own brain is your worst enemy. It can be your best friend, but it can be your worst enemy also. And we want to avoid as much as possible it being your worst enemy, because it just makes the challenge that much more difficult. It just makes the problem that much more difficult. And it also, because of the fact that these planets are in opposition of Mercury, is also showing that there's not a lot of communication going on either. So you're sitting there thinking about it. You're not actually out there trying to find the right words to use to fix the problem. And that is really what it comes down to. Communication is key. If you don't communicate your needs, they're never going to be met. And it's as simple as that. If you communicate your needs in the wrong way, then you wind up in a situation where there's a lot of talking, but there's no action. If the way that you're communicating about the problem is not working, it is time to find a different way of communicating. Get out of that cycle of doing the same thing over and over again. The same thing over and over again does not fix a problem. It keeps the problem going. And the problem is a physical loop, just like it's looping in your brain. It just, nothing ever gets accomplished. We're just going to put it that way. Dare yourself to do things a little bit differently this time. If you, whatever you've done before, don't repeat that. Do it differently. Keep changing it until you find a resolution to the problem, even if that resolution is walking away from the problem. But make sure that you've done everything that you possibly can before you do that. So that's what I have for you guys this week. That is what I have for everybody this week. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out and checking out the horoscopes every week. I greatly appreciate it. I am Melissa Bruce, the Heavy Metal Psychic. I will see you guys next week. Next week, we're out of that Mercury retrograde shadow period. So we'll celebrate that next week. You guys make it a great week, everybody. No matter how difficult the challenge is, it is in your power to make it a great week. I will see you guys next week.